I'm here to sound the alarm. The world must wake up.
I would like to welcome you all to the 5th Regional Symposium on Effective Governance and Digital Transformation for Building Back Better and Accelerating the Implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. My name is Bo Yun-shim, Head of the United Nations Project Office on Governance, a part of the Division for Public Institutions and the Digital Government of UNDESA. I hope through this symposium, we can all learn from our distinguished speakers and apply the lessons learned in our own organizations. The symposium is recorded and live streamed on UNDESA Facebook. To make this event as interactive and engaging as it can be, participants may also send in their questions through the Q&A function of the Zoom platform and on Facebook's comment box. Without further ado, I'd like to officially begin the symposium. It is with great pleasure and honor to introduce the United Nations Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Liu Zhenmin, to deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Liu, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Shen. Your Excellency, Mr. Jin Ha-jung, Minister for Interior and Safety of the Republic of Korea, Your Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Honorable Mr. Park Nan-chun, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this regional symposium, a flagship event convened by the Asia Pacific region by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. I wish to express my sincere appreciation to the Ministry of Interior and Safety of the Republic of Korea and to the Incheon Metropolitan City for their continued collaboration and support to this annual event. I also extend my deepest gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Ban Ki-moon for his visionary leadership and long-standing support, and for sharing with us today his vision and insights on how to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I also take this opportunity to congratulate United Nations Project Office on Governance, the UNPOC, on its 15th anniversary. Since its establishment in 2006, UNPOC has been making significant contributions to strengthening member states' public governance capacities. Indeed, UNPOC has become an important regional hub for governance issues. I highly commend its achievements over the past 15 years, especially its consistent capacity development support to countries in special situations. Ladies and gentlemen, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis have posed multiple challenges to governance. At the same time, these crises also opened new opportunities for building resilient societies against future shocks. Many member states have responded by reconfiguring their public governance systems, leveraging digital technologies to deliver services in faster and more inclusive ways. Public servants likewise have risen to the challenges. They are re-energizing their commitment to a people-centered public service and to a collaborative mindset. I wish to extend my heartfelt thanks to all public servants and frontline workers. Their dedication and tireless efforts have helped to deliver public services in such challenging times. They have stepped up when the public sector is under increasing pressure to ensure citizen-centric services that leave no one behind. Distinguished participants, the pandemic has also shone a spotlight on the need for accelerating digital transformation and for innovation in public service delivery, harnessing digital technologies. It has also underscored the urgent need for bridging the digital divide. Public institutions need to invest in digital infrastructures and training across societies. This will help ensure that its citizens can adapt to a digitalized world and easily access public services. Public-private partnerships as well as digital cooperation among countries can also help to close the digital divide and ensure digital inclusion. I'm confident that with strong political will, international solidarity, and unity of purpose, we can emerge stronger from the pandemic and keep the promise of the SDGs. I have high expectations for the Regional Symposium to continue to serve as an important platform for knowledge exchanges and for peer-to-peer learning. UNDESA stands ready to support you in your efforts to promote innovation and build effective governance that improve the lives of all people. I wish you a fruitful discussions for greener, safer, and a better future for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary General, for the insightful remarks and the encouraging words for us UNPOC colleagues and also for the public servants and the frontline workers for their dedicated efforts during the pandemic crisis. You seem to highlight the importance of effective governance, digital transformation, and the strengthening the national to local governance. I would also like to express my utmost gratitude for the continuous support that UNDESA extends as we explore innovation and build effective governance that helps improve people's lives. It is also my honor to introduce Mr. John Hatchell, the Minister for the Ministry of for the Interior and the Safety of the Republic of Korea, to share his opening remarks. Mr. John will deliver his video message.
안녕하십니까. 대한민국 행정안전부 장관 전해철입니다. 일상 회복을 위한 지구촌의 발걸음이 분주한 가운데 제5회 아시아 태평양 지역 SDGs 심포지엄에 함께해 주신 여러분 환영합니다. 뜻깊은 심포지엄 준비에 함께해 주신 UN 경제사회처 류전민 사무처장님, 글로벌 녹색성장연구소 방기문 의장님, 그리고 인천광역시 박남춘 시장님과 UN 거버넌스 센터 신복인 원장님께 특별한 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 인류는 눈부신 산업화와 경제 발전을 통해 과거와는 비교할 수 없을 정도로 풍요로운 삶을 누리고 있습니다. 하지만 그 이면에는 성별, 계층, 국가 간 심화되는 격차와 환경오염, 기후변화 등 지속가능한 지구촌 공동의 발전을 위협하는 심각한 문제들이 누적되어 왔습니다. 이미 유엔은 수년 전부터 2030 지속가능 발전 목표 제시를 통해 인류가 직면한 위기 상황의 극복을 위한 국제사회의 적극적 동참을 촉구해 오고 있습니다. 그러나 전례 없는 코로나19 상황은 지속가능한 지구촌을 위한 공동의 노력과 발걸음을 더디게 하고 있습니다. 이제 지구촌의 모든 구성원들은 2030 지속가능 발전 목표 달성을 위해 더욱 진지한 자세로 구체적 실천과 행동에 임해야만 합니다. 정부와 공공영역도 예외가 아닙니다. 이번 제5회 아태지역 심포지움은 2030 지속가능 발전 목표의 이행 가속, 그리고 더 나은 미래를 위한 효과적 거버넌스 구축과 디지털 혁신을 주제로 진행됩니다. 국가 사회 간 보다 굳건한 연대와 정보 기술을 활용한 교육, 공공 서비스 등 다양한 분야에 걸친 실질적 기회의 제공은 우리가 지속가능 목표에 보다 더 가깝게 이르도록 하는 중요한 촉매제가 될 것입니다. 한국은 이미 국민이 필요로 하는 정보를 선제적으로 파악하여 차별 없이 과감하게 제공하되 그 과정에서 빅데이터, AI 등 한국이 가진 최고의 디지털 기술을 적극 활용해 나가고 있습니다. 한국은 이러한 앞선 디지털 기술을 활용한 정부 혁신의 경험을 국제사회와 폭넓게 공유함으로써 지속가능 발전 목표 달성에 앞장설 것입니다. 다시 한번 제5회 SDGs 심포지엄에 함께해 주신 여러분께 감사와 환영의 말씀을 드리고, 사흘에 걸쳐 진행될 이번 심포지엄을 통해 코로나19 이전 수준의 회복이 아닌 더 나은 미래로 함께 발전해 나가기 위한 구체적이고 창의적인 방안들이 모색되기를 기대합니다. 감사합니다.
I thank His Excellency Minister John for his remarks and for highlighting the solidarity among countries and the societies, and the provisional opportunities are catalysts to the SDGs. Now it is with pleasure that I introduce Mr. Bang Nam-chun, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City, to deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Park will deliver his video message.
Hello everyone, I am Bang Nam-chun, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City. Pleasure to meet you all. I extend my sincere congratulations on the opening of the 5th Regional Symposium. Also, I thank Mr. Shin Bo-gyun, head of UNPO, and his team, Mr. Ryu Jeon-min, UN Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. John Hatchell, Minister of the Interior and Safety, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, former UN Secretary General, and everyone involved for your hard work and preparations for this wonderful event. The COVID-19 pandemic and climate crisis have compounded inequalities within and between countries. Especially developing countries with vulnerable response systems are hit hardest, mostly affecting the socially underprivileged. For all countries to minimize the impact of infectious disease and climate crisis and become more resilient, it is necessary to build effective public governance and realize digital innovation. In this regard, this symposium themed on effective governance and digital transformation for building back better and accelerating the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development carries a significant meaning. I kindly ask for your high opinions and suggestions. Incheon will actively reflect your valuable input on these policies. Along with UNPO, Incheon will continue to cooperate and lend support towards sustainable development of the international community. Although we gather virtually this time as well, I'll be looking forward to inviting you to Incheon next year and share ideas together in person. Once again, congratulations on the 5th Regional Symposium. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank Mr. Park for his message and for his assurance that Incheon will continue to cooperate and lend his support towards the sustainable development of the international community. Next, may I have the great honor to invite His Excellency Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, to deliver his keynote speech. Mr. Ban, you have the floor.
Thank you for your warm introduction, Mr. Shin Bo-kyun, head of UNPOC. Honorable John Hae-chul, Minister of Interior and Safety of Korea. Honorable Bang Nam-chun, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City. And I also deeply appreciate the leadership of Mr. Liu Jianmin, my good colleague and Undersecretary General of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to address you virtually at this UN DESA Symposium on effective governance and digital transformation for building back better and accelerating the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, SDGs. I take this opportunity to offer my congratulations on the realization of this important symposium, which comes at a critical juncture for both the Asia-Pacific region and our collective efforts to expedite achievement on the SDGs. My gratitude goes to the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UN DESA, the Ministry of Interior and Safety of the Republic of Korea, and Incheon Metropolitan City for their hard work in support of this symposium. My special appreciation goes to all of the delegates, public officials, and partners from Asia, Africa, and beyond who have assembled for this timely symposium. Your ongoing role as SDG focal points, public administrators, and ICT and innovation experts is essential as we strive to build back better and accelerate implementation of the SDGs. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves at the center of a variety of converging crises and increased uncertainty. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic continues to upend our economies, societies, and the way of our lives. At the same time, our planet is on fire, both literally and figuratively, with the climate crisis deepening as the temperatures surge, floods rage, and wildfires burn. COVID-19 and other global crises, such as climate change, have underlined our fundamental interconnectedness. They have also made it clear that in today's world, we need global solutions born out of cooperation and partnerships to holistically address the great challenges that we face. And such solutions must be rooted in sustainability and inclusivity and centered on enhancing the health and resilience of people, communities, and our planet. COVID-19 has also offered us a glimpse of the global disruptions that will arise from climate change in the near future. These include, but are not limited to, elevated public health crisis, mass displacement, turmoil to supply chains, increased conflict, and protracted economic crisis. Both pandemics and climate change are inherently global issues which require a strong multilateral response and increased international cooperation and global partnership. Under this backdrop of COVID-19, planetary crisis, and easing change, we have also made progress in key areas, and I'm confident that we have invaluable opportunities to change the world for the better. But to do so, we must come together in greater solidarity and urgency. Today, I'll speak to you about how we can advance in this era of uncertainty. To achieve this, we will need to better collaborate and elevate our expedited actions to achieve the SDGs, harness the power of cooperation and partnerships, and instill a driving sense of solidarity with others. But we must all play our part in this process. Particularly, the redoubled efforts of participants from national and local governments, international organizations, academia, schools, or public administration, NGOs, and the private sector like you are essential if we are to succeed in creating a more sustainable, healthier, resilient, inclusive, and peaceful future. With this in mind, let me highlight the following areas that warrant our special attention. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, now into its second year, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to alter our personal lives, communities, and the world. With over 250 million global cases and 5 million tragic global deaths, this pandemic has caused immense suffering and serious challenges all around the globe. Beyond the oversized impacts on global economic growth and pronounced supply and demand side disruptions, COVID-19 has also amplified existing inequalities in health, labor, housing, food, gender, and other key areas. These impacts have converged to create one of the most significant global socio-economic crises since the Great Depression. For example, the United Nations estimates that COVID-19 cost 225 million full-time jobs in the year 2020 alone. The Global Network Against the Food Crisis says that the number of food insecure people is now at 155 million people, a 5-year high as a result of the pandemic. And UNICEF warns that 1/3 of the world's children are unable to access remote learning during school closures. Under this troubling backdrop of the global development landscape, it is clear that the ongoing recovery will be both extended and arduous, particularly as a vaccine inequity continues to extend the pandemic for so many. To ensure that we recover correctly, it is not enough to build back. We must build back better as well as greener. Indeed, our recovery from COVID-19 must simultaneously address climate action to help guide us towards a more sustainable and resilient future for all people and our planet. With this in mind, I firmly believe that achieving the SDGs can help bring us together and simultaneously enhance global inclusivity, resilience, health, and peace. The SDGs vision for our shared future is to ensure that no one is left behind. In order to meet this noble aspiration, it is absolutely essential to scale up transformation, innovation, and inclusion by all stakeholders in all regions, including here in Asia Pacific, and particularly by public governance officials. During my time as UN Secretary General, I am proud to have brought the entire world together to agree to the UN Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. Previous global governance initiatives were conceived in a much more top-down manner. The SDGs were born out of a more organic, inclusive, and bottom-up process, as determined and agreed upon by UN member states. I worked tirelessly to guide this process forward and harness the inclusive spirit of the first words of the UN Charter, "We the peoples," as part of the multidimensional review and follow-up process. I also ensured that climate change was integrated into the process. To date, the SDGs have made tangible progress on bettering maternal mortality rates, combating poverty and hunger, and improving the quality of water and sanitation. But progress is uneven on others, with some sectors and geographic areas moving faster than others, and COVID-19. The climate crisis and conflict all leading to troubling reversals in SDG implementation on the ground. In this connection, global partnership, including the active participation of leaders like yourselves, the eminent participants of this symposium, are necessary if we are to deliver on our development commitments. Indeed, we need an all-hands-on-deck approach, where everyone joins together in partnership to synergize the ownership, participation, agency, and vital involvement from all people in all sectors of all societies. SDG implementation can also help us fight against and enhance our resilience to climate change and future disasters, as well as synergize sustainable growth. Crucially, we also need increased political will and policy changes on the part of the governments and public officials to scale up investment, innovation, and action in public health, the environment, social protection, gender equality, cities, infrastructures, and education. And refocusing our efforts on achieving SDG 16, which calls for effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels everywhere, is absolutely critical, as it is a true game-changing enabler of all of the other SDGs. In this regard, public officials must refocus their targeted efforts in their daily work moving forward in the 5 thematic spheres of this symposium, namely, first, in the areas of effective governance and public institutions to build back better and accelerate action on the SDGs. Second, monitoring and reviewing of the progress of SDG implementation via quality data. 3, innovation in public service delivery and digital information, building resilience and promoting climate action. And 5, changing mindset and the upskilling of civil servants. This will go a long way in synergizing Action 4 and implementation of the SDGs to help us collectively meet the moments of today. And this is also why the efforts of the United Nations Project Office on Governance, UNPOG, are so important, both regionally and globally. As such, I take this opportunity to extend my sincere congratulations on your 15th anniversary of UNPOG. And I commend the leadership of Mr. Shin Bo-kyun as the head of this UNPOG. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the development landscape today is drastically different from what it was just a few years ago. Indeed, COVID-19 pandemic has brought the interconnected nature of humanity and our planet's existence into fine focus. Similarly, the deepening climate crisis is elucidating the fact that inherently global issues warrant inherently global actions. These are unprecedented times and necessitate equally unprecedented responses from the United Nations and its bodies, as well as public officials, national governments, key partners, and all global citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude. We must keep moving forward to leave no one behind. We need increased cooperation to achieve the SDGs. We need increased cooperation to adapt to and solve the climate crisis and implement the Paris Climate Change Agreement. And we need increased cooperation to fight against the vaccine inequity and decisively defeat COVID-19 before even more dangerous variants mutate and threaten us all. And the public sector stands at the very forefront of establishing the guiding solutions needed to address these challenges. As such, I respectfully call on you to reinvigorate your actions, to strengthen public governance capacities, to accelerate implementation of the SDGs. Today's interrelated challenges and crises respect no borders. Our actions to ensure a sustainable, healthy, resilient, and inclusive future for our next generations simply must transcend all frontiers. I congratulate you again on the realization of this symposium and applaud your active effort to this end. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Ban, for the very stimulating and inspiring words, and also for the encouraging and congratulatory remarks for us. You seem to have highlighted the partnership, solidarity, cooperation for a greener and more resilient future. We highly appreciate your insightful message. And I also hope that we will be able to take your call and reinvigorate our actions to strengthen public governance capacities, to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs, and also to respond to the climate change. Your inspiring words are deeply appreciated. Thank you very much. Before we proceed to the commemoration session, I would like to request our speakers and guests to kindly switch your cameras on for a quick photo session. Please kindly turn on your switch. Thank you very much. Now, let us proceed to the commemoration of the 15th anniversary of UNPOC. I'd like to begin by playing a video showing the mandate of UNPOC and the major achievements over the last 15 years. Thank you. Thank you. I hope this short video provided you with a good overview of UNPOC's achievements. Now, it is my great pleasure to share with you UNPOC's journey over the last 15 years. The lessons learned and our future direction. Next, the world is experiencing its biggest shared test since World War II. The COVID-19 pandemic is setting back SDG progress. Meanwhile, climate change is threatening our livelihoods. Public institutions play an instrumental role in addressing global challenges such as health, inequality, climate change. Effective governance helps public administration overcome challenges and help develop a sustainable world. In face of these challenges, the critical role of effective governance has become even more important in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis. Next, As shown in the video, UNPOG is addressing the pressing issues faced by the member states with an objective to enhance the effectiveness of governance and implement SDGs, particularly SDG 16, which spearheads economic, social, and environmental sustainability. UNPOG works in 3 areas of strengthening public institutions, innovating public services, and engaging whole societies to ensure that no one is left behind. Our target beneficiary is 48 states. Next. This chart shows you UNPOG's 15 years journey with major milestones. UNPOG has continually reviewed, assessed, and adapted itself in line with the changing social, economic, and environmental landscape and the needs of its target member states. In another example, soon after the pandemic hit the world, UNPOG became agile by using online platforms. UNPOG expanded the opportunities for sharing best practices and advanced for providing advisory services to address concrete challenges facing developing member states. Over the years, we have discovered some lessons learned. While the focus is on digital government, it may apply to the other facets of public administration. Why is digital government not working in the developing world? It is because some countries are adopting a project management approach. Digital government is viewed as a standalone technical engineering program and separate from government policy and processes. Similarly, the focus is on technical aspects and not considering social and political phenomenon with local political and country context. Furthermore, demand for e-services is limited and lacking, and there is a lack of buy-in from political leaders and senior officials. And also, there is limited capacity to design and manage digital government programs. Next, we have identified several recommendations. First, there should be local leadership and ownership. The successful cases shouldn't simply be transplanted, but adapted to local context. It should also be ensured that projects have buy-in from locals, both governments and citizens alike. Secondly, there should be public sector reform. Government policies must be reformulated to adapt to new digital tools. Thirdly, the whole of government approach should be in place. There should be collaboration between different ministries and agencies. Furthermore, there should be integrated infrastructure and standardized data management and for efficient data sharing. Fourthly, a long-term perspective should be adopted and accept the reality that change will be slow. However, don't be frustrated. You may reach a tipping point and then the progress will be leaps and bounds. At the last, you will break through the difficulties at some time. Next, technical infrastructure with the social, organizational, and policy change should be combined. Next, institutional arrangement for public-private people partnership should be considered for contracting out government services and project finance initiatives for the investment in digital government projects. Finally, it is recommended to acknowledge the complexities and to break down the complexities into manageable components. Next slide. As you have seen in the short video, we listened to the feedback from our customer countries on how they apply the skills and knowledge gained through UNPOG's capacity development activities. Another concrete example would be in Ethiopia, where they strengthened their SDG planning and monitoring. Next slide. We also heard the voices from our partners where they appreciated our access to information in good governance and e-governance. Now next slide. Now we are left with 9 years to implement the 2030 agenda. UNPOG will seek to expand functionally will strengthen advisory services, including developing practical tools like online courses, handbooks, toolkits, research articles, and papers. UNPOC will develop some tools to support developing countries to look into the building blocks of governance. UNPOC can help them identify their weaknesses and recognize their reality correctly. And the UNPOC will widen its scope. We'll continue to delve into specific issues like disaster risk reduction and resilience, climate change mitigation, digital transformation, digital data governance, and each of the SDGs under the guidance of DPIDG, UNDESA. Next slide. UNPOC stands committed to support our member states in establishing and enhancing governance. Thank you for your attention. Now, I'd like to invite a distinguished guest to share with us their message for UNPOC on its 15 years. First, we'll have the video remarks delivered by His Excellency Ambassador Jo Hyun, the permanent representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my sincere congratulations on the 15th anniversary of the UNPOC. I also commend the accomplishment of this 5th Regional Symposium on Effective Governance and Digital Transformation. I vividly remember when the UNPOC was established in 2006. At the time, no one, including myself, at the time, Korean Deputy Ambassador, was able to imagine that it would achieve such a great success. The UNPOC has become a symbol of the strong cooperation between Korea and the United Nations in the area of public governance. It is also a robust capacity hub for countries in the Asia-Pacific and East Africa region. This accomplishment would not have been possible without the active cooperation and investment of the UNDESA, the Ministry of Interior and Safety, and Incheon City of Korea. The active participation and continuous feedback from partner countries have also played an important role. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to all stakeholders related to the UNPOC. Unfortunately, the pandemic has been worsening the situation in public governance. All around the
Recording
world,
in progress.
we are witnessing inefficiencies in service delivery, growing inequality, and digital divide, the retreat of democracy, and a loss of trust between the public and private sectors. In this context, I think the role of the UNPOC has become ever more important than before. In this sense, practicing and learning good and effective governance is critical way to overcome the crisis and achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. As such, it is essential that we practice innovative governance, which utilizes technologies. I hope that the UNPOC will be the catalyst for realizing such good and effective governance. Dear participants, at the SDG Moment ministerial meeting at the UN General Assembly last September, the inspiring songs and messages of BTS opened my eyes to the fact that young people are the main actors and essential partners in overcoming the crises of pandemic and the climate change. To build back better, we cannot forget to build good governance together with the youth and our future generations. I look forward to seeing more youth programs, such as the Youth Forum at the UNPOG. Once again, my warm congratulations on the 15th anniversary of UNPOG, and the Korean mission to the UN will spare no effort to support the UNPOG's activities. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Ambassador Joe for his encouraging remarks that inspires us. He seems to have highlighted us about the importance of effective governance and encouraged us to be a catalyst for effective governance to achieve the SDGs. Next, the ROK Permanent Mission has truly been a strong supporter of UNPOG from day one, since 15 years ago. Yeah. Next, we have Ms. Achiko Okuda, the Regional Director for the ITU Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, to deliver her commemoratory video message.
Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Liu Zhenmin, Director of DPIDG, UNDESA, Mr. Juan Zhu, Head of United Nations Project Office on Governance, UNPOG, Mr. Bo Kyun Sim, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning from ITU Bangkok. I am honored to join you today at the high-level session and celebration of the 15th anniversary of UNPOG, starting with the Regional Symposium on Effective Governance and Digital Transformation for Building Back Better and Accelerating the Implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, organized by UNDESA, DPIDG, UNPOG, in collaboration with the Ministry of the Interior and Safety of the Republic of Korea on 16th to 18th November 2021. May I first express my sincere appreciation to UNDESA, DPIDG, and UNPOG for inviting ITU to this timely event and providing this platform to discuss how to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs when we are confronted with multiple formidable challenges in Asia and the Pacific. Established as an outcome of the 6th Global Forum on Reinventing Government, held in Seoul, Republic of Korea in May 2005, the United Nations Project Office on Governance has been playing an important role to strengthen capacities of public administration in developing countries and translate the SDGs and other internationally agreed goals into institutional arrangements, strategies, and programs at the country level. In its 15th anniversary, I wish to congratulate UNPOG for its achievements in supporting capacity development efforts, especially in the areas of promoting innovation, harnessing ICT and digital government to successfully conduct regional and global workshops and conferences, strengthen country-level capacities, develop projects of research and analytical work, organize events on networking and outreach, which include Youth Forum on SDG implementation, consolidate the experience and lessons learned from participants and member countries, and disseminate outcomes of UNPOG activities and research outputs. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, is the UN agency specialized for ICTs, with a mandate to connect the unconnected by 2030 and support the achievement of the SDGs. Founded in 1865, ITU works closely with government, academia, industry, and UN agencies to develop enabling digital policies and regulations, promote digital applications and services, strengthen capacities, and ensure digital inclusion and empowerment. It has been a pleasure to partner with UNDESA, DPIDG, and UNPOC because of the complementarity and synergies between our organizations and have shared goals and continued collaboration with uh, UNPOC, which includes the UNPOC's participation in the ITU webinar on National Digital Skills Assessment in Asia and the Pacific in July 2021, ITU's participation in the upcoming Regional Symposium on 18th November 2021, and co-organizing the webinar on digital transformation for the next normal towards an inclusive and people-centered digital society in the post-COVID-19 era on 15th to 17th December 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, we know the challenge is daunting. ITU statistics show that 3.7 billion people, half the world population, lack access to the internet. COVID-19 has made it clear that a lack of access to the digital world now means a lack of access to full-fledged participation in economies and societies. Developing countries and the most vulnerable people, especially girls, women, youth, and people with disabilities, have borne the brunt of the socio-economic disruptions caused by the pandemic, and in the context of escalating climate change and environmental degradation. To tackle the multiple social, economic, and environmental challenges, and to prepare member countries for their digital future, we need to put in place enabling environments and the whole of government and the whole of society approach when it comes to achieving SDGs and digital transformation. We need to invest not only in safe, resilient, and affordable infrastructure and network services, but also in human and institutional capacity and collaborative policy and regulation. Ladies and gentlemen, given the impact of the pandemic, it has become clear that digital will be the catalyst necessary to get us on track to achieve the SDGs by 2030. I look forward to the continued collaboration between ITU and UNDESA, DPIDG, and UNPOC, and wish you a successful regional forum. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank Ms. Okuda for sharing her congratulatory remarks and message on the complementarity and synergies between UNPOG and ITU. Likewise, UNPOG looks forward to the long-term partnership with ITU. Next, may I have pleasure to call upon Dr. Lizan Peranti Kalina, President of the Philippine Society for Public Administration, to kindly share with us the commemoratory message. Dr. Kalina, you have the floor.
Yeah. To our 8th UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Mr. Liu Zhenmin, Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Bokin Shim, Head of UNPOG, distinguished speakers and delegates, it is an honor and privilege to share this space with you as you hold the 5th Regional Symposium on Effective Public Governance and Digital Transformation for Building Back Better. This hopes to scrutinize future trends and learn new approaches in order to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Not only does this speak of a continuing engagement, but also a long-term commitment to promote innovation and intergenerational equity. In pursuit of this vision, the Philippine Society for Public Administration, along with other institutions for public administration here in the country and in Asia, such as the Asian Association of Public Administration, AAPA, the Eastern Regional Organization for Public Administration, Europa, and DAP Graduate School School gladly commemorate the 15th anniversary of the United Nations Project Office on Governance. We stand with you as one community that strengthens public governance capacities needed by organizations today. To recall, over the past years, UNPOG has been our valued partner institution that focuses on the advancement of capacity development programs towards good governance here in the Philippines. This collaboration has been very beneficial for the public administration governance community and academic organizations, as well as to individual scholars and practitioners within and outside the network of PSPA. We are truly grateful that we have the leverage to continue and strengthen this collaboration with UNPOG since 2017, especially our participation in UN Committee of Experts on Public Administration, or UNCEPA, in 2019, under the leadership of then Asian Association of Public Administration President, Dr. Alex Brillantes Jr., and with the recently concluded 2021 PSPA International Conference last October, where Mr. Bokin Shim, head of UNPOG, and Mr. Keping Yao, senior governance and public administration expert of UNPOG, generously shared their knowledge on effective public administration for SDGs and digital data governance for data-centric government. With this, it is noteworthy to share that we support the realization of SDGs and likewise embedded it in our programs and public advocacy activities. This year's Regional Symposium, we are confident that each participant will bring home new knowledge and also new questions to ponder on, with topic areas revolving around the critical issues on the role of public institutions in building resilient societies and open government data and digital data governance. Once again, our sincerest congratulations to UNPOG for its outstanding work in the last 15 years. Very inspirational. Mabuhay, Hiraya Manawari.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalina, for your pleasant remarks and confidence on the outcome of the symposium. I really appreciate your strong support. I look forward to our continued partnership. Thank you. Moving forward, may I invite Mr. Tapan Mishra, the UN Resident Coordinator for Mongolia, to please share with us your message. Mr. Mishra, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Bokyon Shim, for the invitation. Distinguished speakers, guests, and participants, I would like to thank the organizers, especially UN DESA and the UN Project Office of Governance, UNPOG, for the opportunity to speak at this important symposium. It is also a great privilege for me to speak alongside with such respected speakers, including our 8th UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who has been a great inspiration as a leader and provided very valuable guidance and support. Today's topic is more relevant than ever before against the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic, and with less than 9 years to implement the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development. As the UN Resident Coordinator in Mongolia, I would like to share 3 important reflections on how Mongolia is leveraging good governance and digital transformation to build back better and accelerate the implementation of the SDGs, and how the UN is supporting these efforts. First, in 2020, the Mongolian government set out its 5-year mission to build a digital nation. Due to the COVID-19 restriction in place, the people of Mongolia faced critical challenges to access the much needed public services through offline methods. In response, eMongolia enabled over 2 million citizens out of the population of 3.3 million to access services online. Today, eMongolia provides 555 of the most in-demand government services integrated with 55 government entities. The United Nations, including agencies like ITU and UNDP, supported Mongolia through this process by providing timely advisory services, technical assistance, and capacity building. Second, in Mongolia, we recognize that the SDGs would not be achieved unless all actors and stakeholders are actively involved and are taking required actions. Therefore, in October 2021, the Parliament, with support of the United Nations, held the first high-level SDG forum with participation of the Speaker of the Parliament, the Prime Minister, and launched the Multi-Stakeholder Council for Sustainable Development. It aims to enable the Parliament, the government, the private sector, academia, civil society, and development partners to work together more effectively. In a sense, it aims to forge new partners, including in the areas of governance and digital transformation, to implement the 2030 Agenda. The third, 2021 marks the 60th anniversary of Mongolia's membership to the United Nations. This year, we are also formulating the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, or the UN SDCF, which is the blueprint for the UN's development systems cooperation with the government of Mongolia for the next 5 years, which will help to operationalize the UN reforms. I am pleased to share that in this cooperation framework, people-centered governance, rule of law, and human rights are highly prioritized. Digital transformation will be an integral part of the means of implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, the world today is facing unprecedented health, economic, and climate challenges, as been spoken by my previous speakers, all of which are interlinked, increasingly complex, and often competing. Good governance and digital transformation are cross-cutting enablers that are key and could help us to find solutions to effectively respond to these challenges. This would require not only a whole of society approach, also need to go beyond business as usual and to be unafraid to try new approaches and innovative solutions. With this, I wish the symposium great success, and to the UN project on governance, the UNPOG on its 15th anniversary, sincere congratulations and look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mishira, for your warm remarks and also sharing with the audience very important and relevant initiatives you were undertaking in Mongolia, and also sharing the Mongolian government's dedicated efforts to achieve the SDGs. Thank you very much. Now, you young people are the driving force for achieving the 2030 agenda. Now, let me call the winners for this year's 5th Youth Forum on SDG implementation to share with us their messages for UNPOG. Team Pharmacist, the floor is yours.
Hello, we are students from Seoul National University. I am Jiwoo Lee. I'm Chae Kim. And I'm Sohyo. We're the pharmacist team who received the first place award of the 5th Youth Forum on SDG implementation, co-organized by UNPOG, Ministry of the Interior and Safety, and Ministry of the Environment of the Republic of Korea. We are speaking on behalf of all university students that participated in the Youth Forum, and we are very honored to be here to deliver a commemorative speech at the 5th Regional Symposium among such esteemed leaders of our global society. Next slide, please. First of all, we would like to sincerely congratulate UNPOG on this significant milestone. Next, please. It was indeed a meaningful journey for us to prepare for the Youth Forum for several months, through which we came to know and appreciate UNPOG's past and present efforts to promote effective governance. Next, please. And from this, we became more aware of the fact that changes do not just occur. To make changes happen in a good direction, there are many different parties from all walks of life involved. In other words, governance is not a foreign concept, even to us as the youth, who are often ignored or excluded as major agents of change. Next, please. This motivated us to explore and see what problems we could address in our lives. It also inspired us to try and contribute to the process of resolving issues, just as UNPOG has been doing all this time. Next, please. Our efforts culminated in designing the online digital platform called Pharmacy, which is a combination of the words farm and pharmacy, but also farm and democracy. Next slide, please. The platform will function as a pharmacy that helps rural areas institute good governance. Next, please. Promote youth employment. Next, please. And implement green agriculture. Next slide, please. While utilizing ICT technology to engage all stakeholders. Next slide, please. Today's symposium further highlights that digital transformation and engagement of the youth who are digital natives are essential for a more sustainable future. Next slide, please. And through the process of designing the pharmacy platform, we gained invaluable experiences of actively exploring effective approaches to addressing and solving problems in our society. Next slide, please. However, we don't want to stop in the planning stage. Next, please. As representatives of the participants of the Youth Forum, we, along with today's youth, promise to contribute to the mission of UNPOG and to the UN in general for peace, prosperity, and dignity for all.
Through the experience of becoming meaningful stakeholders of global governance, we now gain more in-depth understanding how significant and relevant the effective governance is in our everyday lives.
Sorry, pharmacist, I think your voice is shrinks very much to a low level. Why it happens? Yeah. Please check with your audio. Okay, go ahead. If you check to your audio. Okay.
Okay, so sorry for sorry for the
now.
accident. I'll go on with my speech. Through the experience of becoming meaningful stakeholders of global governance, we now gain more in-depth understanding how significant and relevant the effective governance is in our everyday lives. Anyone can contribute to effective governance by thoroughly observing the society they're part of, actively expressing one's opinion, and taking proactive actions. Next slide, please. And the fifth Youth Forum demonstrated that the youth can be active agents of change through innovative ideas and passion. This will be the foundation for future young leaders to recognize the importance of effective governance and implement it in our society. Next slide, please. Again, we sincerely congratulate UNPOG for their 15th anniversary, and we are committed to support its journey along with empowering youth to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Team Pharmacist, for your commitment in contributing to the mission of UNPOG and the UN. Before we move on for a quick break, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our speakers for this session. Your messages have clearly warmed us, and I look forward to a very engaging and fruitful 3-day virtual symposium. Now, let us have a 5-minute break before session 1 begins. See you again.
Okay, maybe taking this break time, you can check the audio and the video with the speakers for session 1. Yeah, you can check the video with the our speakers for session 1, maybe, yeah.
Test. Hi.
My voice, who?
You are keeping you out?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
So it's fine, you can hear me, right? Thank you.
Hi, Kaping, can you hear me? This is
Yeah, I
Lon.
can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, yes, yeah, very good. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening once again. Have you enjoyed the short break? I'm Bo-Kyun Shim, the moderator of session 1 for effective governance and public institutions for building back better and accelerating the implementation of the sustainable development goals. For this session, our speakers will discuss how effective governance can effectively contribute to addressing the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis and building back better. This session will also elaborate on the importance of policy coherence through institutional coordination at the national level and between national and the local levels. It is important to emphasize that the emerging challenges and effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis have brought about unimaginable impacts globally. Addressing the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis will invariably depend on the adoption of the 11 key principles of effective governance as prepared by the UN Committee of Experts on Public Administration and endorsed by the UN Economic and Social Committee. Without further ado, may I proceed to deliver an overview presentation on effective governance and public institutions. Yeah. My presentation will focus on providing an overview on effective governance and public institutions for building back better and accelerating progress on the SDGs. This slide briefly provides a quick overview on my presentation. Next, based on the emerging challenges and impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis on the SDGs, the UN Secretary General's report on our common agenda presents his vision on the future of global cooperation through an inclusive, networked, and effective multilateralism. The report highlights we are at an inflection point in history, and humanity faces a stark and urgent choice between breakdown or breakthrough. The COVID-19 pandemic has served as a wake-up call, and the world is experiencing its biggest shared test since World War II. Resulting from these emerging challenges, especially on COVID-19, the global GDP decreased by an estimated 3.5% in 2020, with over 124 million people pushed into extreme poverty due to the pandemic. The pandemic, for instance, has caused unimaginable impact, and the UNSG has called on all states to declare a climate emergency. This requires renewed commitments or governance improvement and arrangements. There is the need to develop new capabilities that promote agility and cohesion across the system. Next, as of yesterday, over 5 million deaths due to COVID-19 were reported globally by WHO, and it was mentioned by the former Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. While the current crisis is threatening decades of development gains, the climate crisis has well and truly arrived, and its impacts are being felt across the world. According to the 2021 SDG report, the pandemic has led to the first rise in extreme poverty in a generation, worsened the world hunger, halted and reversed progress in life. Next slide. The pandemic has significantly wiped out over 2 decades of educational gains with increased violence against women, worsened the plight of slum dwellers, and further increased income inequality across societies. Next slide. As the climate crisis continues unabated with the rising greenhouse gases, there is an urgent need to take action to combat climate change and its impact by shifting towards carbon neutrality. Next. Undoubtedly, the pandemic has significantly impacted almost all the SDGs through an interconnected web, as shown on the figure on the left. The current crisis also provides an opportunity for a profound shift to a more sustainable economy that works for both people and the planet. Similarly, the figure on the right shows 6 initiatives illustrating UN Secretary General's proposed climate-related actions to help shape the recovery for a 21st century economy. Next. In the face of all these challenges, the critical role of effective public governance and the public institutions has become even more important in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis. SDG 16 in particular calls for building strong, effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Achieving the SDGs largely depends on the adoption of the 11 key principles of effective governance as prepared by the UN Committee of Experts on Public Administration. These principles must be effective, accountable, and inclusive. Next, it is important to reiterate that a successful recovery from the pandemic, addressing the climate crisis, and implementing the SDGs will risk being inconsistent and ineffective without these 11 SEPA guiding principles and these proposed strategies. Effective governance focuses on competence, sound policymaking, collaboration, and accountability. Inclusive, you can see the specific elements. Next, beyond the 11 principles of public governance, the current global crisis presents implications for public governance. Thus, the crisis has led to more interdependence, calling for collaboration across all sectors, governments, and countries beyond national boundaries. It is important to engage more in collective decision-making with coordinated actions between national and local governments. Velocity, that's the speed at which this crisis occurs, requires the need to capture a risk signal with early intervention. Processes must be streamlined by leveraging digital transformation, data governance to help empower local governments. Due to the complexity that comes with this crisis, promoting effective communication and transparency is helping to ensure inclusive participation and stakeholder engagement. Efforts must be made to embrace and explore uncertainty in the face of a complex future. On the other hand, responding to this global crisis requires some strategies. With the innovation, there should be ownership starting with the leadership to help prioritize a sustainable and green future. Field-based agile decision-making process is also important, as well as addressing outdated rules and regulations. Procedures and processes must be streamlined for flexibility while embrace failure through continued experimentation. Common goals are shared to ensure consensus within the organization. Create your own values, emphasize with citizens, and build resilient supply chains. And at that time, you can embed the change. Address social issues to deal with the return of big government, widening inequalities, and social unrest due to poverty, unemployment, sense of deprivation, to leave no one behind. More importantly, the key governance principles must be revisited. Next. UNPOG, DPID, UNDESA is currently promoting effective public governance and supporting to strengthen capacities of member states through training toolkits, handbooks, capacity needs assessments, and policy briefs. The curriculum on governance for the SDGs is being prepared as a comprehensive set of training of trainers capacity development toolkits, which contain the ready-to-use and customizable training material on key governance dimensions needed to advance the implementation of the SDGs. The curriculum provides methodologies and approaches to advance knowledge and assist governments in developing capacities to drive the transformational change needed to implement the 2030 agenda. These are the 10 capacity development toolkits. UNPOG has developed 3 training toolkits as part of the curriculum on governance. Next slide. In conclusion, I would like to propose these policy implications and key takeaways. It is important to reiterate that in the face of all these unparalleled challenges, it reminded us of the significant role of the principles of effective public governance. The critical role of governments has become even more important during this COVID-19 pandemic. However, care must be taken to avoid big government issues with more centralized systems and big government spending. Effective public governance through the whole of government approach is required. Adopting a people-centered approach through the whole of society approach with stakeholder engagement is important to build trust and ensure citizen buy-in in tackling the climate change impact and other crises. Leveraging digital government and frontier technologies, including data governance, has become an essential part of people's lives because it fosters efficient, transparent, accountable, and inclusive service delivery. Systemic issues like the COVID-19 pandemic requires systems thinking and design thinking. And there should be long-term thinking in an agile manner. Building and promoting national, regional, global partnerships is very important for exchange of technology, innovations, good practices, and other resources for current and future crisis response. Lastly, I'd like to share an important point worth considering. In the progress trajectory, a long-term perspective should be adopted, and the people should accept the reality that changes and the progress will be slow. However, don't be frustrated. A tipping point may be reached sometime. A breakthrough will happen at some point. Thank you very much again for your kind attention. Now, I would like to next, may I invite Mr. Shelan, SEPA member, Dean of Schwarzman College and co-director for the Institute for Sustainable Development Goals from Tsinghua University, China, to provide a presentation on the challenges and innovative approaches to effective governance for building back better. Mr. Xue, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm honored to have this opportunity to attend this symposium. I'm very happy to see many old friends and new friends in the forum. I think that I still have very fond memories of several years ago attending a similar symposium in Incheon in Korea. I hope that we'll be able to do the face-to-face meeting again very soon. Now let me next. Let me respond to the two questions that was raised, by the organizer about, how we actually what are the challenges and the innovative approach for accelerating the implementation of SDGs, and also what are the emerging trends and lessons learned from COVID-19. I think we all realize that the impact of COVID-19 on the implementation of SDG has been disastrous on almost all SDGs, particularly on health, as my colleagues have already mentioned that, in terms of the health impact, I think by the account yesterday, 5 million people have died because of COVID-19, and over 250 million people are infected by the virus. And again, all of these numbers there's probably enormous underaccounting because of the nature of the issue. And also there are many mental health problems increased significantly across the globe, according to some academic surveys. So now I think the world is trying to move out of the pandemic. It's indeed, I think it's time to think about how actually we can accelerate the implementation of SDGs so as to make up the time we lost. So I think Ms. Kim's, I think that graph, I think we hope indeed we're reaching that inflection point. And so I think that the two issues that raised to me that was very timely and also important. Next. So let me first to see, what are the challenges in innovative approach to ensure the implementation of the SDGs. Several years ago, I've written an article about, what are the challenges in implementing SDGs. So I think actually these challenges still remain. And because of the COVID-19, it's probably becoming much more so than ever. SDGs are really ambitious and complex, as my colleagues have already mentioned. Because of the the issues are involved, very complex, and also there's a very diverse landscape in terms of development around the world. So I think actually we also have you want to ensure no one is left behind. So how do you address this diversity in terms of development stages and priorities of different countries? That's sort of one big challenge. And also connectivities. There's so many connections among different goals and also among different parts of the society and also international spillover effect. At the same time, I think that the capacity of public sector in almost every country is limited. In fact, I think the pandemic has shown this. I think that later I will talk a bit more. I think in terms of the finance, in terms of financing, in terms of government capacity, in terms of policy coordination and the coordination among different countries, I think all of those, I think we can see the pandemic has really shown the challenge the public sector is facing. And the third, I think, was the policy environment is also very uncertain. I think, I think that this sort of epidemic, I think during the COVID-19 is clearly shown that communication is a very vital part of the public governance that maybe we have not paid enough attention to in the past. So how do we communicate with the public? How do we persuade people to join the SDG effort? I think that's another huge challenge. And the final, of course, is the measurement issue. I think that I don't have to belabor here. Next. I think that, of course, there are many, I think over the last few years, we've already seen many, innovative approaches to really to improve public governance, to accelerate the SDG implementations and so on. So I think, and my colleagues at the SDG Institute in Tsinghua have also done some work. Because of the time limit, so I have summarized them into several key bullet points I think that might be useful for our colleagues to share. I think the first, I think there's a need to conduct strategic planning for SDG implementation. Because I think SDGs, such a comprehensive, development ideas, and so I think different countries have national and local priorities, and also implementing this is also a huge challenge. So there's a need to really identify what is the priorities for my country and for my region, and how actually we can have an action plan that moving step by step. And also sometimes actually you may have to decide how some priorities you spend more resources, and others that you may want to do that later. So there's that process. It's a complicated process. That strategic planning, I think, is vital, so that you do have a process to move forward. The second thing, I think, how to combine top political will with local entrepreneurship. I think we need that top level policy will to move things forward, and also to make sure that the policy direction is consistent. But at the same time, that alone is not enough, because I think implementation is such a complicated process, and so we need to have that flexible implementation approach, and also we need to tap into the local entrepreneurship. I think that's critically important. How to combine the two, that's another, I think, extremely, useful skills for public sectors. And the third is public communication on SDGs, to really build a social consensus on SDGs, so that actually the general public will have to we all support all efforts related to SDGs, and particularly in many cases that there might be trade-offs between development and achieving some SDG goals. And the next one is reform the government for SDGs. I mean, SDG 16 itself is really calls on building up strong institutions, and so clean and competent government is necessary condition for achieving SDGs. And also, I think that we at least we see so many challenges in terms of governing capacity in addressing some of the issues. So digital transformation can provide a huge help to bridge the gap in capacity, and also transforming the way how government functions. So I think those are the four at least approaches I see that can help to to help us to improve the public sector to achieve the to accelerate the SDGs. Next. Now, let me respond to the second question. What are the emerging trends and lessons learned from COVID-19? Fortunately, I was on a Lancet commission on COVID-19 and co-chairs on the task force on health and diplomacy. I think we did quite a comprehensive report. I think the report is still under revision, and so I'm just sharing some of the highlights of that the work that we did. I think first of all, I think in terms of lessons learned, the first thing is that it's very clear that our multilateral system was not prepared to deal with a major public health crisis such as the COVID-19. WHO did not have the clear mandate and authority, nor have the resources required to fulfill its role. So I think that's sort of a big lesson that we have to recognize. The second is that most of the domestic responses of national governments was dangerously insufficient for many different reasons, and in some countries was politicized, and in other countries there was not enough resources. So there are many reasons, but overall, I think that's what we see, that in most of the national government was not enough prepared. The third, I think NGO and civil society organizations displayed remarkable resourcefulness and adaptability in filling the gaps in global pandemic response. So I think they really played a quite important role. But of course, there's no way they can replace the role of the government and multilateral institutions. And the fourth one is that scientific collaboration, including collaboration within the business sector, has been one of the true bright spots that the of the worldwide pandemic response in terms of the sharing, the research outcome in terms of developing vaccines and various treatments. I think that has been, quite useful, and now it's helping us to try to get out of this pandemic. And the last but not the least, I think it's in the age of social media, the infodemic is a serious threat to public health, and I would argue that in the future also a threat to the achievement of the SDGs. So we do have to be very mindful to this new emerging issues. Next. So now let me finally give some recommendation that was based on the report. First of all, is that we need to improve global governance system for pandemic response, but not just for that, but also for crisis management. We need to provide with UN with the resources it's needed, and we'll also need to empower WHO to be able to respond. And also, I think, importantly, we need to establish an institutional mechanism, such as a UN Global Resilience Council, to deal with non-military security threats. We have the UN Security Council dealing with that. So I think that improving global governance system is so important and vital for us to respond to various kind of emergencies. The second is we need to strengthen regional health organizations to adequately fulfill the roles as facilitator between global and national system. I think that the POG, I think it's is one in institutions. Next, this is the last slide. And also build on effective local pandemic preparedness measure and infectious disease interventions. I think that, again, is also quite important. Of course, we also need to improve international regulatory mechanism to expedite the evaluation and approval of safe and effective diagnosis drugs and vaccines. And finally, I think the enhanced scientific collaboration and improve science policy that's really needed to address pandemic risks, and also improve the reformed IPR system to make sure that the vaccines can be developed quickly and also being disseminated to where it's needed. So I think those are some of the critical recommendations that was provided by the task force. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, for Mr. Xue for highlighting the challenges and the innovative approaches to effective governance for building back better. Thank you. Next, may I invite Mr. Imnu Yaya, coordinator of balanced payment, Ministry of National Development Planning, Indonesia, to deliver a presentation on the critical role of public institutions for building a resilient society and the SDG implementation. Mr. Imnu Yaya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Shim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia. It is a great pleasure for me to join this forum with all of you here during this difficult time. I hope that all of you and your family are in good health. My prayers are with those who have been impacted by the COVID-19 and the frontline workers who have made unimaginable sacrifices to keep us safe. On behalf of the Director for Macro Planning and Statistical Analysis, Mr. Eka Chandra Buana, allow me to congratulate on the 15th anniversary of UNPOC. I would like to extend my gratitude for being invited to speak at this symposium regarding effective governance and digital transformations, and congratulates the UNPOC, DPIDG, and UNDESA for successfully organizing this event. Please, my presentation. The slides. Mr. Shim, could you upload the slides?
Yeah, my colleague. We did happen to receive your
Oh.
slide, so.
Okay, wait. Wait. So Shim, could you see the slide? Is it
Yes,
okay?
I can see. I can see.
Indonesia has a vision to escape from the middle income trap and become a developed country by 2045 with equitable growth as reflected by zero extreme poverty rate and impoverished access to decent work. The Republic of Indonesia has great potential of the fourth most populous country in the world with rising middle class, demographic bonus, and stable macroeconomic conditions. In handling the pandemic, Indonesia is taking the necessary measures of subsidies and budget reallocations supported by synergy between institutions and all elements of the nations. Indonesia is also committed to achieve sustainable growth and therefore committed to the SDGs. Indonesia has managed to achieve relatively good records on 2019 SDGs achievements. However, COVID-19 brought negative impacts for both Indonesia's economy and SDGs achievements. In the short term, COVID-19 has brought economic contractions along with a decrease in investments and productive sector performance, a lower per capita GNI that brings Indonesia back to its lower middle income status, a higher unemployment, and a great damage for business, especially micro, small, medium enterprises. The COVID-19 pandemic will cause several threats for the longer term due to wider financing gaps, slow recovery of crucial sectors such as tourism, a shift of workers into informal sectors, and a lower health and education quality. These impacts will hamper Indonesia's SDGs achievement, especially for goal 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 10, and 12. In addition, Indonesia will also have to adapt to new trends in a way of living brought by COVID-19, such as digitalization, telework, and green recovery. In greater details, COVID-19 pandemic has affected Indonesia's SDGs achievement through social, economic, environment, and justice and governance pillars. In the social pillars, COVID-19 has caused a slower decrease rate of poverty, lowered nutrition status, etc. In the economic pillar, COVID-19 has decreased the rate of dissipating inequality, lowered quality and productivity of the workforce, etc. In the environment pillar, COVID-19 has caused a more limited financing access for housings and etc. In the justice and governance pillars, COVID-19 also impacted public service responsiveness. Post-pandemic, Indonesia will need to address its existing and potential challenges in a timely manner. Therefore, an economic transformation is needed so that Indonesia will not only recover from the pandemic, but to achieve a higher growth trajectory. A short-term intervention is needed to achieve economic recovery, focusing on the demand side and increasing people's purchasing power. In the longer term, a supply side interventions to increase overall productivity is imperative. Indonesia has 6 main strategies toward an inclusive and sustainable economic transformations with SDGs as main instruments of each strategy. The 6 strategies are to increase competitiveness of human resources, enhancing economic productivity, implementing green economy, implementing digital transformations, achieving domestic economic integrations, and relocating the capital city. In implementing these 6 strategies, we need to take into account that fiscal capacity, institutions, and bureaucratic reform are critical for any economic transformation strategy. To put this strategy for economic transformation into actions, collaborations between stakeholders are paramount. Achieving ambitious SDGs target will require an integrated play of 5 Ps, matters of the people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and the planet. We must leave no one behind as stated by the imperative core principle of SDGs. Especially, it is also important to localize SDGs achievement plan to subnational levels through various roadmaps, actions plans, SDG centers, and local business processes. Government, philanthropists, businesses, academia, scholars, community, and media must work hand in hand to contribute to the SDGs. For example, the government could contribute through means of policies and programs, while the scholar focus more on research as base for policy formulations. Community and media will be responsible for managing information and knowledge shared to the public, while businesses and philanthropists contribute in form of business advocations and financial support. In localizing SDGs implementations, several challenges may arise. First, there are still uneven understanding of SDGs concept, framework, and principles. Second, involving all stakeholders in contributing toward SDGs still need to be worked on. Third, the national and subnational government are still not fully synchronized in implementing SDGs-related programs and activities. Lastly, there are still limited data and indicators to measure and compare the achievement of SDGs, especially at subnational level. The role of government is very important in addressing the existing challenges, especially with the impact generated by the COVID-19 pandemic. A systemic change is needed to better establish necessary partnership and attaining multiplier effects. The government needs to place social impact as a strategic priority, facilitate ecosystem for an open and innovative partnerships, and establish greater relationship with stakeholders. The government of Indonesia has also led collaboration between stakeholders to cope with the pre-existing challenges. Innovative policies and practices have been established through SDGs roadmap, national and regional action plans, metadata generations, and monitoring and evaluation guidelines and reports. The government of Indonesia has also facilitated various innovative learnings, capacity, and partnership opportunities through SDG centers, academics, and ambassadors. Innovative financing for SDGs has also established through SDGs Financing Hub, an integrated national financing framework, and SDGs Investment Map. Lastly, efforts for innovative data is being worked on through SDGs dashboard and means of big data. Here we can see some practical examples of Indonesia's commitment toward the SDGs, including establishments of coordination team, mainstreaming SDGs in national development agendas, SDGs roadmap, SDGs center network, various reports, and sustainability reports. All of these documents are open and publicly available. So far, we have addressed the potential challenges and progress of Indonesia's SDGs achievements. Taking into account the importance of resources to achieving the SDGs, we would like to take the opportunity to highlight Indonesia's great potential related to funding for SDGs. The government of Indonesia, through Bappenas, has coordinated an SDG financing hub for integrating, facilitating, and synergizing all potential innovative financing to accelerate SDG achievements through strategic network combining government funding, businesses funds, and communities funds. This means accentuate Indonesia's commitment to work together in achieving SDGs by utilizing all parts of society. To conclude, we would like to affirm that Indonesia is highly committed to achieve SDGs target in 2030 through the COVID-19. Though the COVID-19 pandemic has made many development achievements were hampered and even reversed, with the highest commitment, Indonesia stands ready to roll up the sleeves to be sustainable and resilient. The government of Indonesia will leave no one behind. Distinguished participants, so far we have discussed about the important role of governance and public institutions for building back better. Through upcoming sessions of this symposium, may we be able to understand better about the necessary means of generating an effective governance and digital transformation to achieve sustainable development. May we also be able to work hand in hand to put today's discussions into actions for a better governance and for a sustainable futures. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yaya, for sharing insights on the critical role of public institutions for building a resilient society and the SDG implementation, and sharing us for the Indonesian government's commitment to achieve the SDGs. Thank you for excellent presentation. Next, may I invite Ms. Ivona Spiktovsky, team leader and the strategic planning officer from the UN Resident Coordinator's Office in Thailand to provide the first presentation on mainstreaming public governance in common country analysis exercise by UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Ms. Spitovsky, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me today. And perhaps I'll just take a second for the organizers to put up my presentation. If it's available, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share my perspectives on effective governance and building back better to reach the SDGs. And as applied by the UN through its programming tools, such as the Common Country Analysis and the Cooperation Framework. Next slide, please. The world continues to face an unprecedented challenge in the COVID-19 pandemic. As said by the UN Secretary General Guterres in his recent Common Agenda report, we have a choice between a breakthrough or a breakdown. Either we can continue with business as usual and risk perpetual crisis, or achieve an international system that delivers for people and the planet. I am grateful to the Republic of Korea and colleagues at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs for hosting this symposium and drawing on the expertise from diverse sectors of society, as we have heard already, to make substantive contributions through good governance. We are here together working towards solutions. Government representatives, donors, international organizations, the youth, civil society, academia, and the private sector. Over the next 3 days, we are manifesting breakthroughs instead of breakdowns. It's an honor to join you in looking at the many entry points to leverage public governance, innovation, and good practices, as well as to learn from each other and to accelerate the SDGs in Asia Pacific. In my remarks, I would like to make 3 points. Firstly, I would like to set the context of the United Nations positioning on the ground to be better equipped, agile, and evidence-based, providing high-quality support to public governance, and how this has been enabled through the most recent UN reforms. Secondly, I would like to speak to the tools and methodologies deployed by the UN to build evidence base through the Common Country Analysis that informs on program priorities. And lastly, I would like to speak to how analysis translates into partnerships between the United Nations and the host country through the cooperation framework to prioritize policy action for inclusiveness, effectiveness, and resilience to build back better. Next slide, please. To my first point, I would like to start by setting out some context. The UN is seemingly reforming forever, as it should. As a multilateral organization fulfilling the letter of our charter, the UN has a responsibility to continue improving, be agile, and adapt with the times, so that it can better maintain international peace and security and achieve cooperation in solving international problems. The latest slate of reforms focused on repositioning the United Nations development system and specifically reinvigorating the role of the resident coordinator as an empowered, independent, and impartial representative of the Secretary General, and coordinating the UN system-wide support on the ground. The resident coordinator's leadership, convening power, and engagement with host governments and development partners should enable a coordinated and effective response of the UN country teams in the country. The reform fundamentally shifts the development system to be needs-driven. All UN support elements are interlinked and focused on an offer to countries that is derived from a single common country analysis with data that can inform national plans and identify national needs. UN commitments are made through sustainable development cooperation frameworks, about which I'll be speaking shortly. The review of the UN's development system concluded just last month with the General Assembly's adoption of a resolution that recognizes achievements to date, including a better offer from the UN on par with the growing demand of countries in the recovery from COVID-19. Member states are benefiting now from a more tailored UN contribution that responds directly to national priorities, enhancing public governance with greater coherence, transparency, and accountability. These reforms have been successful in part because of the spotlight on our efforts regarding efficiency, improved transparency, and system-wide results, all of which are areas that are in very much high demand by member states. Next slide, please. This is leading me to my next point. I would like to speak to how these reform efforts are translated practically on the ground, including the methodologies and tools that the UN deploys in our partnerships with the government. Prior to formulating strategic priorities, the previous partnership is evaluated so that we could garner the lessons learned from the way we were doing things previously. And the current situation on the ground is assessed through the common country analysis. This has now been streamlined globally. To get at the granularity of gaps that need to be addressed, the common country analysis includes in-depth studies and exercises depending on the country context. This enables the UN to better assess where our own interventions in comparative advantage are best put into practice in comparison to that of other development actors on the ground. In examining the 11 principles of effective governance from the Committee of Experts on Public Administration in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, I have pulled just a few examples on how these have been applied in the common country analysis. In Thailand, the UN has capitalized on its positioning as a regional hub by leveraging the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific's multilateral perspective in the region. We partner with the Commission on enhancing the evidence-based through SDGs progress monitoring and leave no one behind analysis. So we had these two important analyses on which we partnered with ESCAP on. And this is in line with the sound policymaking principle on effectiveness. In another example, with respect to transparency principle, in line with accountability, the UN and Thailand conducted a multidimensional risk assessment, which included the participation of the government and was later considered a best new practice for cooperation frameworks that fosters transparency and integrity in our partnership with the host country. This assessment, this multidimensional risk assessment, is considered complex, interrelated risks, including economic, political, social, environmental, and as related to gender equality. And this analysis of these interrelated risks informed our future strategic planning as well as part of the bigger package of the common country analysis. Next slide, please. Also, as part of the common country analysis and in line with the principle of leaving no one behind and inclusiveness, we applied this consistently in both the common country analysis and the cooperation framework through multi-stakeholder consultations. These included engagement across line ministries, civil society, private sector, and academia. Special care was also taken and resources were deployed to the consultations with vulnerable groups, including minority ethnic groups, the LGBTI community, migrants, persons with disabilities, refugees, women, young people, and others. The consultation strategy was not only particular in its inclusivity, but also in the innovative approaches that we took. While conducting in-person discussions to an extent and social distancing rules permitting, we also relied on digital consultations to gather sufficient data for our analysis. Online consultations allowed us to engage with nearly 500 key stakeholders all across the country. We also conducted public consultations through a nationally representative poll in partnership with the National Development Institute. We launched a public campaign through our website and using UN social media to raise awareness about our work in order to solicit direct feedback from the public to the United Nations in Thailand. Next slide, please. Now, to my third and last point, building an evidence base for sound policymaking, focusing on innovation and digitization and being inclusive enabled the UN to prioritize key issues on which to focus on in the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, as you can see on the slide. The key instrument, the cooperation framework is the key instrument for planning and implementing development activities by the UN system and country. And the principles behind any cooperation framework have been streamlined globally through rigorous guidance and quality assurance. These frameworks are fully aligned with national priorities and produced in partnership with the government in consultation across government institutions, civil society, academia, and other development partners, as I have already shared in the previous slide. It is guided by the UN principles of leave no one behind, human rights, gender equality, sustainability, and resilience, addressing some of the more complex and interconnected development challenges. This becomes even more pertinent as the world recovers from the pandemic. This generation of cooperation frameworks embeds public governance that promotes digitization, innovation, and policy coherence in social and economic recovery, as well as efforts to preserve environmental gains. This is absolutely critical today, especially on the heels of COP26. In Thailand, as you can see on this slide, the 3 strategic priorities that have emerged are aligned with the national plan, as you can also see in the inner circle, and include a focus on 1, inclusive and green economy, 2, investing in human capital development by strengthening institutions and partnerships, and 3, reducing inequalities. More specifically, the UN will focus on interventions on inclusive and sustainable economic growth, enabling and strengthening public sector capacities for low carbon society, as well as disaster recovery and reduction in the first outcome. In the priority of human capital development, the UN aims to improve accessibility and quality of public services in Thailand, as well as work in the digital transformation space for inclusion and promoting innovation. And lastly, in our third outcome, in the space of reducing inequalities, the UN will provide an enabling rights-based and inclusive environment, as well as promote good governance and the rule of law. Next slide, please. I also wanted to spend some time to talk about the UN's value proposition. How will we get all of this delivered? This context presents opportunities for the work of the UN and our value proposition in an upper middle income country like Thailand, which is a quite unique setting that requires high-level thought, leadership, and customized support. The UN brings cutting-edge policy support and technical assistance, drawing on global expertise and best practices. We are mainstreaming values of Leave No One Behind, as I have given ample examples today: human rights, gender diversity, equality, resilience, and sustainability. The UN is also harnessing science-based solutions to development challenges, such as climate change, air pollution, reducing emissions, demographic dynamics, big data analysis for the SDGs, and the digital divide. This is made possible by collaboration with donors and development partners, such as with the Republic of Korea, and close coordination across UN system to ensure that our approach is coherent. At the local, national, and regional level, we are coordinating strategic partnerships that support innovation and integration in integrated development solutions. The private sector and young people are playing an increasingly important role in these discussions, and the UN has an annual dialogue with the private sector here in Thailand through the Global Compact Network Thailand. We have also institutionalized engagement with young people and through the SDGs Youth Panel, and we are now looking for making similar arrangements with civil society engagement. Lastly, the UN, in responding and engaging on international dimensions of development, such as migration, trade, and trafficking of people, wildlife, and drugs. These are human rights as well as economic and security imperatives for Thailand and the region, on which we are also working. Next and last slide, please. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, there is a clear international consensus on the urgency of progress on the SDGs and working together on the interconnected challenges of sustainable development, eradicating poverty and addressing inequalities, as well as mitigating and adapting to climate change. Making these goals a reality relies on evidence-based and efficient public governance based on inclusive and responsive structures that give every member of society a voice. The common country analysis and the cooperation framework lay a foundation for that quality of integrated policymaking and implementation. For all of us here today, our commitment, hard work, and partnerships are the building blocks for a resilient and inclusive world in which we all want to live. Thank you very much for having me here today, and I look forward to the next presentation by my colleague Revai from Fiji, and also the discussions that follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Spitovsky, for your excellent presentation on mainstreaming public governance in common country analysis exercise by UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Also, thank you for your excellent, inspiring message by highlighting the governance principles: effective, inclusive, and accountable governance. Thank you. Finally, may I call upon Ms. Revai Makanje Albeck, Chair of the UN Pacific Strategy Outcome Group on Effective Governance and Community Engagement, UNDP Pacific office in Fiji to provide the second presentation on mainstreaming public governance in common country analysis exercise by UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Ms. Albeck, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Ola Vinaka from Fiji. I would like to start by conveying my warm regards from the UN Pacific offices in Fiji, and also to congratulate UNPOG on the commemoration of its 15th anniversary. Thank you, Mr. Shim, for giving me the opportunity to share with you and your esteemed audience the experiences of the UN in the Pacific in strengthening effective public governance in the Sustainable Development Goals processes, including the Common Country Assessment. I will build on the presentation by my UN colleague Iwona in Thailand and rather take a deep dive into the practical experiences of the Pacific. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by highlighting some of the peculiarities of the Pacific Island countries and their context so as to situate the rest of my presentation. First slide, please. The UN in the Pacific is working with and serving 14 Pacific Island countries and territories, also known as large ocean states, excluding Papua New Guinea, which has its own rest and coordination system. The estimated population of the countries is 2.4 million. There are huge discrepancies in population sizes across the countries, with Fiji having the highest population of about 900,000 and Niue with the smallest population of about 1,700. A significant contextual issue, which you can already see on the map that is part of the slide presentation today, is the dispersed nature of the region. The Pacific comprises thousands of islands covering 15% of the Earth's surface. Most Pacific Island countries and territories that are being supported by the UN system are archipelagos consisting of a large number of habited and uninhabited islands, with Nauru and Niue being the only countries consisting of a single island. This presents just but one of the complex contexts of strengthening public governance and institutional strengthening for public service delivery within the Pacific. In addition to this, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the climate crisis and emergency, further complicates and compounds the challenges and experiences of the Pacific Island countries in the region. Again, as part of painting the context, many of you may already know that the region experienced the most rigid border lockdown over the past 2 years globally, plunging many of the countries relying on tourism into deep economic crisis. With this context given, I would like now to share with you how the United Nations Development System is working in the Pacific to support the aspirations for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. So to support the aspirations of the countries in the region, the United Nations system is organized on having one cooperation framework, which we call the United Nations Pacific Strategy. We have 3 resident coordinators covering the number of countries highlighted in the slides, sitting in Samoa, Federated States of Micronesia, as well as Fiji. The United Nations Pacific Strategy, which is the current one, 2018 to 2022, being costed at around $780 million, is very essential document in terms of leading the processes of supporting development aspirations in the region. The United Nations system is therefore organized around 6 strategic outcome areas, which include climate change, disaster resilience, environmental protection, gender equality, sustainable and include economic empowerment, equitable basic services, effective governance and community engagement, as well as human rights. Again, serving the 14 countries in the region, the United Nations system under the United Nations Pacific Strategy operationalizes the work at country level through what we call the annual joint action plans specific to the needs of each country, as well as to the United Nations Development System's offer. Next slide, please. With With this context in mind, the UN system in the Pacific has embarked on the development of the new Pacific Common Multi-Country Assessment, which will lead to the development of the new United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework covering the period 2023 to 2027. And again, in light of the complexity and the context which I've painted earlier, we're having one regional overarching chapter, which is followed by 14 country-specific chapters covering the development context, the SDG progress analysis, emerging trends and gaps, and transformational opportunities for attainment of SDGs by 2030 in these countries. And for the United Nations system, the institutional arrangements are with the Pacific Regional Architecture and bodies, the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, as well as the Council of Regional Organizations of the Pacific. We also have, and through the 3 resident coordinators, set up the national steering committees at country level. We have learned a lot of lessons through support to the Pacific Island countries and territories, and some of these lessons have become much more apparent when we were providing support in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is building on these particular lessons arising out of the COVID-19 pandemic that we are having a special context of mainstreaming public governance in the CCA process. Next slide, please. As we are really at a critical juncture, one of the key aspects on the overall regional analysis is the overarching aspect of public governance and institutional strengthening, including the regional and sub-regional integration within the Pacific, and the criticality of the regional and sub-regional integration and their bodies in delivering the sustainable development goals. Additionally, the commonalities across the Pacific Island countries on public service delivery challenges and on strengthening institutions through a regional approach gives an impetus to further strengthen the outputs and as well as the outcomes that will be a result of this analysis. Next slide, please. At country-specific level, in terms of the 14 countries that we are supporting and developing the country common analysis documents, the UN system is looking at analyzing institutions with a focus on key aspects of responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative institutions as the cornerstone for sustainable development in the Pacific. Additionally, we're also looking at capacity to address complex and compounded challenges related to the COVID-19 recovery and to address the climate emergency, economic recovery, and social cohesion, all of this being predicated on strong and effective institutions at the country level, from the center of government to subnational authorities. Next slide, please. So the strategies for mainstreaming effective public governance have been informed by lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic through the support that has been provided to the Pacific Island countries. And I would like to highlight at this particular point a few examples. But before I do so, I think it is important to share with you that the outbreak of COVID-19 hugely disrupted the linear development trajectory that many of the Pacific Island countries were pursuing. The process of reprogramming and responding to COVID-19, other than emphasizing the fault lines in institutions, also gave the opportunities to leapfrog institutional strengthening processes through new frontiers which would otherwise have been slow or would have otherwise been neglected. And it is this experience in the past 2 years where the support from the United Nations Development System has also focused on the uptake of digital solutions to support the countries as they were battling the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and its devastating effects. Within the realm of e-government, the first example that I want and I wish to share with you is on e-parliament, where ICT and digital solutions were provided to Pacific parliaments and congresses to enable business continuity, sitting of parliaments virtually, and enabling oversight committees to meet, to conduct business, including holding virtual outreaches between citizens and institutions, which at the time of uncertainty and need was critically important. In addition to this, I would even want to highlight that as Fiji was battling the second wave of COVID-19 with unprecedented positivity rates, the UN development system facilitated the holding of hybrid sessions of parliament, enabling the passing of the 2021 to 2022 budget, which was critical for the government's strategy to respond to the pandemic and to enable nationwide rollout of the vaccination. While being cognizant of the digital divide across and within Pacific Island countries, a number of justice institutions took on the task of digitalizing in response to the COVID-19 health protocols, as well as to lockdown measures. The successful leapfrogging of digital solutions has spurred institutions to develop comprehensive digital solutions, offering customer-centric delivery services and enabling certain levels of efficiency and effectiveness. I want to speak on to the third point around the adoption of integrated approaches or portfolio approaches to governance solutions. And in this case, one of the key aspects arising again from lessons of COVID-19, but to inform and continue to inform the CCA process, is that the portfolio approach to institutional strengthening and leveraging on governance solutions is important. For example, in Vanuatu, a voter registration process in preparation for elections was turned into the development of a comprehensive national ID system with unique identifiers for citizens, which is now servicing not only elections, but also the rollout of COVID-19 vaccinations, e-commerce services, and NCD health tracking. The hard lockdowns as part of government's COVID-19 containment measures definitely provided strategies to deal with infections. However, they created distance between subnational authorities and institutions, as well as the center of government, thereby again highlighting the importance of strengthening not only the center of government, but subnational authorities and local authorities in order to ensure full recovery from COVID-19. The centrality and meaningfulness of citizen engagement is one again of the key lessons to be highlighted. Next slide, please. Moving on to some of the key lessons and focusing on the last three, the uncertain, emerging, and compound nature of the crisis presents an opportunity for dynamic and forward-looking Pacific based on strategic foresight. Effective and sound policy making through identification of strategic policy levers is also very, very critical, and again, an issue which is being mainstreamed in the development of the CCA across the countries. Directly linked to the points above is one on the aspect of anticipatory, adaptive, and agile governance. This aspect calls for institutional mindset shift to facilitate effective response and service delivery in a continuously changing context. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to finish my presentation by highlighting that the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has really compounded the challenges for the Pacific region and its countries and territories. And as part of COVID-19 recovery, effective governance and strengthening of public institutions is more than ever before more critical for Pacific Island countries if the SDGs are to be realized. We are grateful to our partners, development partners, governments, private sector, civil society, and many other stakeholders for their cooperation. Thank you so much for this opportunity and look forward to further engagements. Binaka Vakalevu. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Albaik, for delivering your presentation on mainstreaming public governance in common country analysis exercise by the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. Thank you very much for its insightful message. Now I turn the floor over to Mr. Pravin Maharajan for Q&A session.
Thank you, Bokin Singh. Thank you all the speakers for your insightful contributions and statements. So as we reach the end of presentation session, I would like to open this floor for Q&A. For our participants, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to raise them to us through the Q&A function on Zoom and our comment section on Facebook. So now we'll allocate 25 minutes for the question and answer portion. If you have any questions, please send them to us via the chat box so we can address them. So we have received some questions from the registered participants. The first question I would like to ask Mr. Bokyun Sim to answer. How can effective governance enhance sustainable development? This question is from Mr. Henry Williams, Executive Director, National Disaster Management Agency, Liberia. Mr. Bokyun Sim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Praveen. Yeah, actually, I think it's an excellent question. As you know, the SDGs are overarching issues. Not only that, these days we are threatened by crises, risks such as COVID-19 pandemic and the climate change. Currently, the pandemic reminded us of the critical, significant role of public institutions and how effective governance can contribute to addressing pandemic and the climate crisis. But if you take a look at close look at the SEPA principles on effective governance, you can get some insight for the solutions. How can we address this crisis through these governance principles? The crisis requires us very effective governance, because the nature of the crisis, as I presented in my presentation time, the interdependence of the crisis, it requires calls for strong collaboration and collective decision making based on evidence and data. And also the velocity, the speed requires us to the digital technology, data governance, and frontier technologies to address these critical issues. And the complexity of the nature of the crisis requires us to enhance communication and transparency and stakeholder engagement to leave no one behind. So we can effectively address this kind of crisis through effective governance. But to be noted is that the ownership, accountability should start with the leadership, and the leadership, the government should address outdated rules and regulations, and the process should be streamlined for flexibility. Those kind of things we should take note of. Yeah, that's from my side. I think other speakers can add more. Thank you very much, Pradeep.
Thank you, Bokyun, for highlighting the ownership, accountability, leadership, the elements of governance to enhance sustainable development. Now we have one question from Aslam Alam to Professor Shulan. Could you please highlight some innovative counter-infodemic measures?
Thank you. Thanks very much for the question. Indeed, I think that's a new challenge to our public sector, to how to combat the the infodemic that now that's been so salient in our fight with the COVID. I think the first thing that probably what we need to do is to establish reliable information source. This can be from the government, can be from academia, can be from NGO. I think that to have a reliable information source is vitally important. And the second thing is to build some sort of mechanism to coordinate, among scientists, to communicate with the general public. I think such as news briefing, organized by the government, but actually, to let scientists to be the main speaker, so that there's a consistent voice. Because I think that indeed, particularly when for a pandemic like this, I think initially there is indeed some different different interpretation and different ways to address this, and so I think even among scientists there might be different opinions. So I think those differences should be debated among scientists themselves, but in terms of with the general public, they can say, okay, what we have, what is our conclusion? What is the issue that we may have different opinions? So to be honest with the public, but also do not let the detailed discussion, exposed to the general public, that indeed in many cases generate confusions. So I think a mechanism for for communicating with the general public and coordination among scientists, that's another issue that needs to be addressed. And the third, I think, is also, I think in the long run, I think there should be a way, I mean, for every society to really to improve the science literacy of the general public, and also to develop the culture to respect knowledge, respect science, and also to let the scientific community and professional society to play a critical role in this, information, in communicating with the information to the general public. And here I think that there should be better coordination and collaboration between the public sector and also the government and also the scientific community.
Thank you, Professor Sulan, for highlighting coordination between public sector, government, and scientific community, as well as communication between scientists and general public. Now, I would like to direct one question from Mr. Leonard Anorte, Assistant Director, Local Government Service, to Mr. Yaya. So the question is, building back better can be realized when we give greater autonomy to local government units. In what ways can we strengthen? Mr. Yaya?
Yes. Thank you for the questions. In Indonesia, the Secretariat of SDGs has also helping the regional government to formulate the regional action plans. So right now there has been 31 provinces who has a regional action plan, and it will by the end of this year become full of 34 provinces. So the inclusiveness and collaborations of the government from the national and regional level is very important. That's the first one. And then the second one, we also highlights the importance of the SDG centers from the academics. So the national government and also the academicians hand in hand join together to increase the capacity buildings of the regional governments. In Indonesia itself, the regional government has bigger roles in setting their own targets in regional targets, macroeconomic targets, and also the SDGs targets due to autonomy law since 2003, if I'm not mistaken. So the role of the regional government is very, very high in Indonesia, and the national government until now really close, and that's hand in hand synchronizing their plans and their goals. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Pravin.
Thank you, Yaya. So now I would like to direct one question to Ms. Iona. How are environmental concerns addressed in country strategies such as poverty reduction and sector strategies? And how are they reflected in the national budget? Ms. Iona?
Yes, hi, thank you so much. Environmental concerns are, global and very serious. And I think every country has commitments towards finding solutions, as we have witnessed at the COP26 with the outcomes that everybody's digesting on the heels of that just finishing earlier. And so in Thailand, for example, the UN country team is also partnering with SCAP on some important data and studies. We're doing chemical fingerprinting of haze in order to track where it's coming from, so that then on the ground we could work with the sources of that pollution to minimize it and to mitigate it. So I think a really important strategy is to first do some assessment of what the problems are, where the pollution is stemming from, in order to identify the best programmatic solutions. So for example, we are working through FAO, with agriculture and with farmers to support them to better, reduce their fingerprint in as far as environmental concerns. We are working through other agencies as well, through UNDP, has a lot of climate action activities on the ground. And so it's really an approach that requires addressing through assessment of the situation, addressing this in national policies on the regional, on the subnational level as well, and then working with the specific targeted communities on the ground to support mitigating environmental risks and climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iona. So we have one question for Ms. Revai. What are the possible strategies of developing capacities to achieve the 2030 agenda in countries where there is conflict or climate crisis? This is a question from Ms. Sandra, senior lecturer from South Africa. Ms. Revai, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for the question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. There's absolutely no one response to this kind of a complex situation that we find ourselves in, because as countries face multiple and compounded challenges, including the conflicts that are ongoing in different parts of the world, as well as the climate crisis, which is not leaving any country spared, given some of the weather phenomenon that we have experienced over the past many years. The strategies for engaging and for strengthening institutions would entail one, a whole of society approach is what is needed, a whole of government approach, as well as the capacities and the capabilities of investing strategically resources into those areas of work where there can be quite some significant difference. So the COP26 we just finished just now is one of those processes and strategies that need to now be implemented on the ground in order to be able to deal at least with the climate and conflict and the climate crisis. When it comes to issues around conflict, I think this is where the key message from the United Secretary General on prevention of conflict as well as mitigation where conflict happens becomes very critical. And again, a whole of society approach in engaging with factors that cause fragility in society, with factors that cause political instability in society, as well as the aspect around foresight and anticipation becomes one of those key tools for managing and dealing with these kind of crises well before they take place, and if they do, as well as managing some of the mitigation. I'll stop here because I think the response to to the question would have to really take quite a long time to delve into, but these are just some of the few examples or specifics that I can share at this particular point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Revai, for highlighting the whole of government and whole of society approach for all the to tackle this climate crisis and conflict. I would like to ask a question from Mr. Aslam to Bokyun. How UNPOG is contributing to develop capacities of public institutions to improve public service delivery? Mr. Bokyun, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Praveen. Thank you for the good question from Aslam Alam. Yeah. As we discussed in our previous time, our UNPOG aims to strengthen the effective governance capacities of developing member states. For that, we are now focusing on capacity development activities such as workshops or forums. And not only that, we also have been developing practical tools. As I said before, we developed training toolkits for trainers, and also we are developing handbooks and research articles or papers to help the countries address the issues. And also we are now we advanced for providing advisory services targeting specific issues facing the developing countries. In collaboration with the global organizations and partners under the guidance of DPIDG, UNDESA. That is from our side. But not only also not only that, we are cooperating with the DPID UNDESA in developing checklists, readiness assessment tools, monitoring indicators, and other things for practical tools. Thank you, Praveen.
Thank you, Bokyun, for highlighting our UNPOG capacity development activities to support the member states. Now, I wanted to ask one question to Professor Sulan. How do we reform the academics and civil society from being exclusive and elitist to being inclusive in disseminating SDGs? The question is from Mr. Christopher Mantilas, Associate Professor, Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Professor Sulan, you have the floor. Professor Sulan, are you there? Okay, I will ask this question to him later. So I'll ask another question to. Okay, sorry. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. Can you please repeat the question again?
Yeah. So how do we reform the academic and civil society from being exclusive and elitist to being inclusive in disseminating SDGs?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really a very critical question. I think that I think in a way, I think the role I think of academia and NGO has been so important. As we see that really sort of if we want to implement SDGs, knowledge and skills are so important, and so academia has been such a wonderful place to provide those skills and knowledge. And the other things also, I think the NGO has been shown that particularly in responding to the pandemic, has been really, I think they provided shouldered a lot of heavy burden and provided so much needed support in responding to the pandemic. I think the critical thing is, first of all, I think for the government to provide some platform, so to allow the academia and NGOs to play the role I think that's probably the first thing that's needed, because I think that in many times that NGOs may have the the energy and the capability, but at the same time, they're not necessarily well coordinated. And so here the government can play some role in helping NGOs to build the coordinated platform to provide the support. The second thing I think is also there's a need for the government to build an advisory system to allow academia to really work with the government agencies, to work with NGOs, to get to know the firsthand, what is the challenges and what are the experiences, and so that actually those knowledge skills and can be synthesized, can be in a way sort of synthesized, and then it can be disseminated to the broader spectrum of the society, so that actually the impact can be amplified. So let me stop here.
Thank you, Professor Srilan. So we have one question from Joshua Ligari. I would like to direct this question to Ms. Revai. The question is, can we say that e-platform will revolutionize the operation in achieving SDGs? How it will be favorable to those who don't have the luxury of this technology?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Look, I think one of the key challenges that we face is around the digital divide and how it's affecting those with and those without access to internet, for example, and ICT technologies and platforms for them to be able to access services and to engage and participate in the broader society. So at this particular point, I think as we continue to drive and push for e-platforms of all kinds, including strengthening e-governance, there's always a need to have a very clear strategy on not leaving anyone behind through introducing of such platforms, but also at the same time, pushing in the boundaries around what can possibly be done to support member states and governments to ensure that these new technologies and these new platforms, as they are taking over the world, become also part of the norm for accessing services and to facilitate participation. Again, it's a complex question and one which really requires a lot of multi-pronged approach in order to be able to make these e-platforms, e-governance, and e-government an all-inclusive, leaving no one behind and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Revai. I would like to direct this same question to Mr. Bokyun Sim as well.
Yes, thank you. Now it is already replied from our registered coordinator. But if I add some more, the digital technology, we witnessed how effective and efficient the digital technology worked for addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. But though we do not have the systems embedded in your country, but the basic principles of digital government technology is, I think, you can take up the principles, the business process or procedures should be streamlined, and the flexible and agile response to the issues can be executed if you reform the streamline the current system. And also without the EE platform, I think the technology evolves very quickly. Even though the portal system is not there, you can consider the adoption of cloud services by renting some facilities. So you can consult with the technologists and your government officials about that. You can, without those stage of portal system, you can leapfrog, I think, to the mobile using mobile systems by making use of cloud service. I think, yeah. That's
Thank
it
you.
from my side.
Thank you, Bokyon. Now I have one question for Ms. Iona. How do you see the world after pandemic?
Thank you so much. It's an easy and a complex question all at once. Obviously, what we are all on all of our minds, it's the new normal. We're no longer, there's no going back to the way that we were before. And really what I think Secretary General said this as well, what's happening right now is a dress rehearsal. It's definitely a warning for humankind. It's giving us a taste of the tragedy and devastation that can happen if we don't act now, if we don't realize our own vulnerabilities and create a better world for future generations. We need to be serious, and we need to realize, and the world is realizing how climate change is affecting us and making millions of people currently already vulnerable in the world, and this could escalate. So I hope that the pandemic is, on one hand, a warning to humankind, to leaders, but also to everyday people about being empathetic and conscientious and being thoughtful about the world that we are building for the future generations. But I also would like to say that I think living in this kind of reality now, because I can't really say we're out of the pandemic or even coming out of the pandemic, right? It's also shown us how resilient we are, how quickly the vaccinations got sorted out, how quickly on a daily basis information is new, and how humankind is really adapting. We're schooling from home, we're working from home. We have not seen loved ones. We have been reunited with loved ones. We are debating vaccination. I mean, the comfort level on vaccination, it varies greatly across the world, is what I'm trying to say. So there's a lot going on. We've been through a lot, but also at the same time, our personal lives have slowed down as well. So I think there's a lesson in all of that as well. So I hope that we come through the pandemic not being complacent and into a kinder world.
Thank you. And definitely we have learned lots of things from this pandemic and the way forward. Now I would like to ask one question to Mr. Yaya. What is the best fiscal reform to implement in the time of building back better in the local government from the perspective of Indonesia?
Yeah, from the perspective of Indonesia, fiscal reforms, and yeah, we have really so much problems in regional, especially in fiscals. They depend on the national governments, like more than 50% of their spending for their income. So for tomorrow, going forward, the national governments sets a lot of regulations to set lower level of the income that they can distribute, so that the income itself can be distributed to the project that impacted socially and inclusively. So that's the direct measures from the national governments. And another is a capacity building that is led by the national government for the regional government, for there to search another income source such as innovative finance in regional levels, so that the cake itself should be bigger, so that a lot of programs and also activities can be done that impacted positively and sustainably to the society. That's all. Thank you, Ms. Pravin.
Thank you, Mr. Yaya. So we have one question for Mr. Bokyun Singh. What are the plans of UNPOG from raising public awareness to imposing action to all public and private sector across country from short-term to long-term perspective?
Thank you, Pravin. That's a very excellent question. Nowadays, the climate action requires us of a strong partnership between public sector, private sector, and the civil society and citizens. This climate crisis, if we tide over this crisis, we can open a new opportunity, new world for us. If we are overwhelmed with by this crisis, we might be in a difficult situation. All the sectors should put together to address this issue. There is a critical role, a significant role of public institutions in this task through effective governance. It means that we should have a clear target and vision and master plan and the methodologies. We can spearhead digital government technologies to this crisis. So the private sector is in particular, the private sector, they should do more. The private businesses are very much they are causing the carbon emissions. So, but they have not enough capacity to address these issues. So the governance sector should take the lead and take. But the technology is lies with the private sector, so they should collaborate together. So the governance sector can should play the role of effective governance by providing the practical tools such as providing financial assistance and establishing institutional arrangements for climate crisis. The climate crisis requires reforming all the current system. So the legal institutional arrangements should be established to address these issues. Of course, all the national and the local governments at all levels. So UNPOG is now plans to provide the service on this kind of actions or roles. What should be done by the public sector? So we are now developing handbooks, and we are addressing the critical issues facing developing member states in addressing these climate issues. We are consulting. We are consulting with them for that. So those kind of channels we are now developing to help the developing countries in addressing these issues. Thank you, Pravin.
Thank you, Bokyun, for highlighting our UNPOG's awareness raising program. Unfortunately, we have come to an end for this session. So thank you very much for your enthusiasm and very engaging participation. On behalf of UNPOC, DPIDG, UNDESA, we hope you enjoyed and learned something from today's session. Before we close today's session, I would like to invite you to kindly fill out the post-event survey form through the QR code or the link shared on your screen via chat box. If you have any questions that you wish to raise or would like to participate in an online discussion among other participants and speakers during and after the symposium, please scan the code to your device and sign up on the online discussion board. Again, heartfelt thank you for all your participation, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow for session 3 and 3. Have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pravin. Thank you, Mr. Shim.
Thank you, Imnu, Yaya. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, distinguished speakers and excellencies and the participants.